Thomas Watson has given us 20 motives for loving God, building upon that principle that all things work together for good to those who love God, and so helping us to answer the question, well then, do I love God? Those 20 motives were found on pages 88 to 98 of this edition, and now Watson is going to exhort us further to preserve and increase our love to God, pages 99 to 103. So his first concern is preservation. Don't let love diminish. Satan wants to blow out the flame of love, and through neglect of duty, we also lose it. Of all graces, and this is a fearful wonder, love is most apt to decay. Therefore, we need to be more careful to keep it up. So, how do you know when your love is weak and sick? And Watson uses the imagery here of a consumption, of a wasting disease. How do you know that your love has a wasting disease? And he says, first of all, you lose your taste. Now, that might be very COVID-19. You not so much your appetite, that follows on, but your taste buds. You no longer find the things of God sweet and savoury. It's a sign of this wasting disease. You used to find comfort in drawing near to God. Watson says, in effect, imagine putting some honey in your mouth and saying it's just like a sort of a gel or a paste or something. He says, when you can go to God's word and there's no sweetness, when you can go to God's ordinances and there's no blessing in them, no sweetness of taste about them, then you know that you are losing your love. And then he moves on, secondly, to Christians losing their appetite, that you don't even have a desire, a relish for your food as you did before. You used to have your mind on things of a heavenly aspect, of a heavenly look, the grace of the Spirit, the blood of the cross, the light of God's face. But now, no appetite, no prizing of Christ, no strong affections to the word. Your hearts do not burn within you. Watson says, when you've not just lost your taste, but also your appetite for heavenly things, it means that your love is wasting. The third thing he identifies is Christians growing more in love to the world than they have love to God. And when that's the case, it shows that our love to God is decreasing because our love for other things that are rivals to God are increasing. He says too many Christians are like the fish in the gospel which had a piece of money in its mouth. They cannot lisp out 3 words, but one is about mammon. What's he saying? Money. Your thoughts and affections, he says, are still all to do with the earth. When all you can think about and speak about is this world and this life, what does it say about your love to God? He says when someone is weak and sick, they stoop down and they go hunched over. He says when your love is sick, you'll be stooping down to the earth and hunched over for the stuff of this life. It hinders your graces. And then the fourth evidence is when you don't really care very much about worship, when it becomes a dry or a dead duty to you, performed in a formal manner. If they're not left undone, yet they're still ill done or badly done. The strings of a violin cannot make good music when they are slack. And Watson says when the strings of our love are slack, then they'll not produce any fine notes. Watch out for this, says Watson. Beware of this wasting disease of love. A soldier may as well be without his weapon, an artist without his pencil, a musician without his instrument, as a Christian can be without love. This is what we need above all as God's people in the earth. So he asks, how can you keep your love from going out? How can you stop it wasting and extinguishing? His answer, watch. Watch, and when you see love declining, when you see any decrease of that appetite for God and the things of God, when you get dull and listless, use the means that God has provided for your quickening, your enlivening. When you see the flames dying low, says Watson, add a little more fuel, use the bellows, Put on something to accelerate the flames. Use what God has given to keep the flame bright and lively and warm. Throw on the fuel. Make use of ordinances and gospel promises. And then the last thing in this chapter, an exhortation to increase your love to God. So Watson says you should have love, and then you need to keep that love at a high pitch, but you also need to increase that love, not just maintain, but advance in love. Let your love be raised up higher and higher, he says. Paul prayed to the Philippians, to God for the Philippians, that their love might abound more and more. It's to grow, it's to develop, it's to advance, it's to become brighter and more beautiful. Don't be content, says Watson, with just a scrap of love. Work it up. Don't be content with the spark. You want it to be a flame and a fire. A godly man can be contented with a very little of this world, but is never satisfied without more of the Spirit's influence and adding one degree of love to another. And so he's going to give you some incentives, more motives. Why should you and how will you increase in your love to God? Why would you want to do this? First of all, the growth of love demonstrates its truth. When there's fruit, you know there's a root. When love increases, then you know that it's real. He says paint doesn't grow, and a hypocrite's a painted Christian. It's static. There's no advancing. But where you see love to God increasing, you know it's alive and growing. Second thing, by the growth of love, you imitate the saints in the Bible. Well, here's a sweet encouragement for us, because he reminds us that someone like Peter's love was not constant. And there were times when his love was dented. At first, it was more infirm and languid. It was listless when he denied Christ. But then he says, think of what he was like afterwards. Think of how love increased. Think of how he went on to be able to say, Lord, you know that I love you. The tender plant, the little sapling that was first blown down by the wind of a temptation, grew into a cedar which all the powers of hell could not shake. And that should encourage us, that though our love may be faint and frail at times, nevertheless, by God's grace, it can then grow into something far more substantial. Third thing, the growth of love will amplify the reward. The more we burn in love, the more we shall shine in glory. The higher our love, the brighter our crown. Just going back to the principle that the rewards that are held out for love should increase our love. And then the fourth thing, the more we love God, the more love we shall have from God. What an attractive prospect. If we want the smiles of God's face, we should strive for higher degrees of love. Paul was the example of this that Watson holds out. He counted gold and pearls, but dung for Christ. So inflamed with love to God that he could have wished himself accursed from Christ for the sake of his brothers, the Jews. He says that doesn't mean he didn't love Christ and he didn't care about Christ, but such was his zeal for the glory of the Lord that he would have been content to suffer beyond what is fit to speak if God might have had more honour. And Watson says that's the highest pitch, really, that love can reach. Never then was any man a loser by his love to God. So, Watson says, let love increase that it might not decrease. This exhortation will be out of date only when we come to heaven, for then our light shall be clear and our love perfect. But now, says Watson, it is in a season to exhort, that our love to God may abound yet more and more.